Enterprises are really itching to implement more automation within their AP process, which in and of itself is fantastic, right? However, there are three key areas, in my opinion, that are either forgotten about or glossed over when enterprises look to transform AP. The first, in no particular order, is that enterprises really want to automate more of their workflow and approvals, with the intent being to encourage fewer manual touches on invoices and a general increase in overall straight-through processing rates. But the problem with only prioritizing workflow automation is that the challenges that AP teams face with that workflow are often due to or a result of poor data quality from the seller invoices being received on the front end of that process. So process automation and workflow automation as a goal is fine in theory, but really only if the data coming into either the customer's ERP system or AP automation solution is digital, clean, and compliant. Right? Otherwise, the issues that AP needs to deal with in the workflow end up being more tactical. Things like, does an invoice have a missing PO number? Is there a missing customer reference ID on the document? And other fields, right, that are critical to AP being able to process the document. So before automation can actually improve workflow, right, enterprises really need to focus on ways to engage sellers and help digitize those relationships so that digital invoicing becomes the standard and the priority. And then while invoice digitization, as I mentioned a second ago, is certainly critical to driving an increase in straight-through processing for enterprise AP teams, just asking sellers to change the way they invoice and submit invoices digitally isn't always enough to help truly digitize those relationships. Right? It's critical that enterprises understand that their digital transformation must offer value not only to their own business users, but also to their sellers. Right? So too often, enterprises are evaluating technology like supplier portals, right, which promise sellers a way to submit invoices to their customers, as well as the ability to check on the status of an invoice or its eventual payment. But those portals are often built in a buyer-centric fashion, which actually forces sellers to join multiple portals, right, to transact with multiple customers. Right? Not to mention that some or many of these solutions even charge sellers for these features, right, diminishing the overall ROI and value offered to that group. So the moral here is really that enterprises should and need to evaluate solutions that offer optimal value and low cost, and in the case of TradeShift, no cost, right, for sellers to maximize the impact of that digital transformation for the sellers. And then last but not least, enterprises can almost never just replicate their existing processes and workflows in a new AP automation solution. And too often, I see enterprises evaluate technologies that are hyper customizable, really to accommodate each and every unique workflow they currently have in place. And the reality is that digital transformation in AP, that implies actual transformation, right? Meaning that implementing a solution can actually allow an enterprise to review processes and workflows and actually determine how they can achieve maximum efficiencies, ROI, and higher rates of straight-through processing. So that evaluation of technology really has to come with a willingness and an openness to work smarter, whether that means reducing old workflow steps, eliminating unnecessary points of friction in the process, right, and have that willingness to reevaluate as they're purchasing new technology.
I would like to know from your side then, what are the critical elements to digital transformation that enterprises do not consider in their solution evaluations?
Sure. And for this one, I want to focus a little bit on enterprises who are actually just entering the world of AP automation for the first time, meaning that the lion's share of their process is done in an ERP system or manually via email and spreadsheets. For those enterprises who are entering the world of AP automation for the first time, I often see an intense focus on things like document OCR, RPA, scan and capture, as the obvious in their minds, right, next step in their digital transformation journey. And while OCR can certainly be an aspect, or OCR, RPA can certainly be an aspect to an AP automation strategy, the value that those technologies provide is really very buyer-centric and limiting. And if I'm an AP user at an enterprise and I think, well, I want my invoices OCR'd so they can be digital for me and my company, right? It's very buyer-focused. And so OCR on its own, it really offers minimal transformation, right? As the enterprises will still be dealing with sellers sending paper invoices. They'll still be dealing with high volumes of paper and unstructured PDF invoices. And frankly, the sellers don't receive much value from that process at all. Right? So enterprises really should partner with their technology provider that they're evaluating to develop a strategy to move sellers to more digital-first submission options. So at TradeShift, for example, we provide sellers of all sizes, sellers that are invoicing very high volumes a year, sellers invoicing very low volumes a year. We provide those sellers of all sizes the ability to submit digital invoices, whether it's through direct integrations with the seller ERP systems for your highest volume sellers, or through things like the ability to receive a digital purchase order through TradeShift and turn that purchase order around into an invoice and deliver it back to the customer. Whether that's through PDF connectors. So some sellers have the ability to send a structured PDF out of their ERP system, right? We provide the ability to leverage a connector, take that data, convert it to TradeShift's native format to deliver a true digital invoice to the customer. Or lastly, if you're talking about very small sellers that invoice very infrequently, right, we provide a way for those sellers to digitally invoice directly through our user interface. So the point being here is that the combination of digital invoice submission options for sellers, right, not just OCR, not just RPA, right, along with the ultimate transparency and visibility into the approval and payment processes around that invoice, are really the keys for value-driven AP automation. The next thing I want to highlight around items that enterprises don't always consider in their evaluations is that enterprises too often can desire that big bang approach with their digital transformation instead of taking a more phased and calculated approach. And one of my former bosses like to say, you can't boil the ocean. And I use that mantra when I encourage prospects, especially those that have a global presence or have sellers based in countries beyond North America, to really have a plan in place for a phased approach to automation, right? Consider a rollout that focuses on one country, one region, perhaps one group of suppliers at a time if possible, because shorter term, smaller business wins can really lead to better overall digital transformation success as time goes on, both with internal stakeholders as well as with your participating sellers. And then lastly, right, engaging sellers and including them in your automation journey is absolutely critical to overall transformation success. And while sellers need to be activated into your program at the outset, right, there also needs to be an incentive for them to stay transacting with you digitally. How are you engaging your sellers? Are you making it easy for them to use your solution? How do they get trained when they get active on your network or your platform? Do they have self-service tools to remove barriers to transacting with you? Right? How are they informed of new solution features that might actually make their lives easier as well? Right? Do they have any skin in the game when we talk about product roadmap development or feature functionality enhancements? And so enterprises really should make sure that the solutions they're evaluating and selecting help reduce friction not only for their internal users, but for the sellers for sustained and valuable engagement from that group. I hear a lot about manual processes in AP, and primarily that's due to a lack of an AP automation solution, right? There's a heavy burden placed on manual efforts, right? I mean, a lot of enterprises are still dealing with invoice matching exceptions via spreadsheet. They email spreadsheets to the next person who needs to approve the exceptions and approve the invoice, right? There's no transparency and visibility between internal stakeholders to see where an invoice is, right? Too many times invoices have to be emailed from one person to another, right? There's not a humongous source of visibility within ERP systems, right? Oftentimes ERP systems only allow, AP users, AP managers, visibility into that system. A business user or somebody who might need to approve an invoice doesn't have visibility into the ERP system. So the results here make a lot of sense. And I think the reality is that all of these challenges, right, can aggregate into a lot of friction in AP, whether it's friction internally in getting invoices approved and paid quickly, or friction with your sellers, right? All of these issues, right? High paper volume, high seller inquiries, like limited visibility, all of that adds up to, if I'm a seller and I have to reach out to the organization to look for invoice or payment status, and that invoice hasn't been resolved yet, right? I'm getting paid late, I'm unhappy, right? So the idea of evaluating AP automation really is not just about helping your own organization deal with manual processes, right? That's a goal, but can also be to get your sellers into the fold and on the same page and give them some value, because really digital transformation starts with the sellers sending you invoices that are digital, compliant, free of exceptions, so that your AP process flows more smoothly, again, either in an ERP system or in an actual AP automation solution.
Justifying ROI for automation initiatives when there's lower scale can also be a really big challenge. Do you offer a light version that can address such challenges at all?
So Tradeshift specifically has several versions of our AP automation solution. Some enterprises will come to us looking strictly for just e-invoicing, right? So the ability to receive invoices digitally from sellers and then pass those invoices through Tradeshift to their ERP systems, where they would do the lion's share of the invoice matching, invoice coding, and approvals. However, we also provide a solution that combines e-invoicing with full-scale AP automation, which would include invoice and PO matching, three-way matching with invoices, POs, and goods receipts, non-purchase order invoice coding, digital collaboration. So there are different versions depending on the needs of the organization that we can offer to enterprise customers.
I would like to know what makes it a network different from a more traditional supplier portal.
This is a really important question and topic, right? Because again, when we have enterprises come and speak with us, they're often evaluating technology that includes supplier portals, and it's important to distinguish between a portal and a network, right? So traditional supplier portals can and do promote the ability to have a seller submit an invoice, check on its status, receive payment confirmation and remittance data, which are clearly all valuable benefits to the seller, right? There's no doubt about that. But the challenge historically with portals has been that they've been built in a very buyer-centric manner. And what I mean by that is if I'm the buyer and I want to receive invoices from my sellers, I just tell my sellers, go join my portal, right? Which is great for me, right? Because I get my sellers to join. But what if another buyer or customer comes along and asks the same seller to join a different portal? And then yet another of the seller's customers comes around and asks that seller to join yet a third portal. Right? Portals historically have been built to allow many sellers to connect to one buyer, but not so often for many sellers to connect with many buyers. So as a result, sellers, in order to maintain and manage all of these different portals, would need multiple logins for these portals to access different customer accounts. This is a ton of work for the seller, right? And can often lead to what we call portal fatigue. Tradeshift is different. Right? Tradeshift is a true B2B network, right? Think LinkedIn when you think B2B network, or when you think network, right? Where sellers can connect and transact with multiple buyers and customers via the same set of credentials. So for the sellers, I can join Tradeshift, connect with my existing customers, and connect with companies I might want to do business with in the future, all in the same network. And it's as easy as me sending Jordan a LinkedIn request, right, to add her as a professional contact, right? A request is sent, a request is approved, and then the two parties can begin to transact with each other immediately, right? Tradeshift really believe in low transaction barriers between buyers and sellers.
Most enterprises understand how AI can improve AP efficiencies, but may be fearful to deploy it. What would you say to those enterprises or AP teams?
I would say I empathize with those enterprises, right, who might be fearful of deploying AI in their AP process. And I understand how difficult the idea of moving process decisions that historically have sat with, human business users, right, and move them towards layers of AI. That can be scary, right? That's absolutely true. Tradeshift comes at the use of AI in a unique way in that we offer our customers the ability to leverage and roll out AI that is smart and works best for the enterprise. So what we hear is that enterprises often want the ability to leverage AI, right? They want to use it to increase straight-through processing. But for a period of time, allow business users to review and evaluate how that AI is performing, right? So you get the best of both worlds. You get the automation, but you can also double check to make sure it's working to your standards, right? And as the business gets more and more confident with AI, rules can be updated to allow for more touchless processing, right? A decrease in that human review element. And for lack of a better expression, right, TradeShift finds that this crawl, walk, run approach to new automation tools like AI really does help offer a level of comfort to our customers in rolling out AI, especially those customers that have yet to really, dip their toes in the water, so to speak, of artificial intelligence.
What is the biggest AP challenge you face in your organization? So, too many manual processes in AP workflow was the biggest challenge. And then it should come as no surprise then that increased automation would obviously be the way to improve current AP processes the most. But I'd love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'll go back to something I said earlier, which is I do often caution enterprises I speak with to be careful about trying to implement automation with the expectation that they can fit their existing process that's currently in a box, right, into a brand new piece of technology. I think it's important just to remember that in order to get optimal automation, right, through whatever technology investment you're making, the idea of moving into that evaluation and that decision, saying, I'm going to keep the same exact process, I just want to automate it, right, can be, not always, but can be a recipe for disaster, right? So what I would suggest is that when companies are evaluating opportunities to automate workflow and just leverage additional layers of automation, that they do look at the sort of front end of that process and make sure if I'm paying a lot of money for new enterprise technology, but my suppliers aren't going to send me invoices through that technology, I have a great shiny piece of new software or a shiny new network that might go underutilized because I haven't really focused on providing value to the other side of the equation, which is the sellers. I think the improvement in workflow and the increased automation can absolutely come, and that is all clearly the goal. I mean, the goal of TradeShift, in a small nutshell, is increase straight through processing in AP, right? But that can only happen if there's buy-in from your sellers as well to evaluate new ways of sending invoices, which then allow automation to do its job because you're getting better data, cleaner data coming into your solution to begin with.
I would love to know what are some of the strategic points of automation in the AP process, because we know end-to-end processing in general is something that is like a long-term strategy for a lot of AP functions. But I'd love to hear from you a little bit about just kind of understanding where are the best opportunities to target bottlenecks and potentially processes that are prime for automation.
It starts with invoice receipt, right? Again, I mentioned this earlier. Right? Too often, too many sellers are sending paper-based invoices that are that paper-based, so they're harder to process and get into systems. They may also lack critical data points that buyers need to process those invoices. And then add to that, if your organization's global in nature and you're getting invoices from sellers from other countries, right, tack on country compliance requirements to that sort of manual invoice mess, right? So leveraging automation for invoice receipt, right, to ensure invoices adhere to country-specific requirements as well as business-specific requirements is going to be critical to, the buyer receiving clean invoice data and moving towards touchless processing. The next thing I would say would be invoice and purchase order matching, right? Evaluating that, right? As an organization, are there ways we can introduce more automation to 2- and 3-way matching processes, right? Are there tolerance levels that we can evaluate to prevent business users from needing to approve exceptions that amount to a few cents or a few dollars between invoice and purchase order? So enterprises should evaluate and review a solutions approach to invoice matching and what rules can be established, again, to develop more automation and generate more straight-through processing. The other area of focus should be on sort of the coding of non-purchase order invoices. So too many organizations that I talk to still do things like handwrite accounting codes on paper-based invoices so they can be shared internally and processed accordingly in the ERP system. This is really ripe for artificial intelligence and how it can play a role in eliminating the manual intervention here. Right? TradeShift, for example, we use AI to learn how AP teams have historically coded non-PO invoices and start to make automated recommendations for the AP teams for future coding. So AP teams can leverage AI to auto-code invoices and bypass manual review as they get more and more comfortable with the technology. Next, I would say approval workflow, right? Instead of relying on approving an invoice and emailing it to the next person in your approval chain, or goodness forbid, walking it over to someone else's desk, right? Leverage automated approval workflows in your solution to streamline the process and give all relevant parties that visibility into where the invoice is at any given time and prevent that invoice black hole from growing large. Second to last here, I would say, and this is undervalued, invoice discussion and collaboration, right? We want to remove the friction that decentralized things like email communication presents and instead leverage your solution that you choose or you're working with to collaborate both with peers internally as well as sellers externally to resolve invoice exceptions or disputes. So, and keep in mind, digital collaboration and conversation history should complement document audit trails themselves in the event that future research is required on a particular document. And then last but not least, information being shared with the seller is ripe for automation, right? Instead of requiring the seller to email ap@companyname.com for an update on invoice and payment status, use the solution to expose both invoice status and payment information to your seller, right? Documented payment transparency is going to reduce the amount of inquiries the AP teams receive from sellers. And as a result, it's going to help improve your seller relationships.
And beyond e-invoicing and accounts payable, what other areas are ripe for digital transformation in B2B today?
The natural complement to digital transformation in AP is really digital transformation in procurement, right? The ways in which companies today sell to and buy from each other, it needs to change. Enterprises are really looking today for B2B purchasing to more closely resemble the B2C shopping that we all do in our personal lives in the evening and on the weekends. Right? And there's really no reason that can't happen and that shouldn't happen. Right? In a trade shift, we're actually seeing more and more interest in our B2B marketplaces offering, both from existing AP automation customers as well as net new prospects who are looking for better ways of managing their B2B spend and shopping and procurement best practices. And they can use our network to extend that model that we bring to AP. They can extend it to their approach to procurement as well.